opposite sex to be romantically interested in you as opposed to someone else? This is actually part 2 to answering that question. And I feel like my answer, which was about half a year ago, was convoluted with a lot of points to take away, mainly in regard to your state of being. How are you supposed to respond when she's in love with someone else? Or it could be a dude if you're a lass. And this guy rang me up one time, maybe 4 years ago, telling me about his situation, that he wanted the girl to pay attention to him instead of this other guy. And instead of reiterating the same answers I've already shared in my video, just look up Yenovah Tylervite on Google, how to get someone interested in you at the workplace, something like that. You'll probably find my answer there on either TikTok or YouTube. But this is going to be like a part 2 to that. And since that video, I have learned something profound. I've come to learn about Neville Goddard. And it changes the game a little bit. It changes the game. Because at first, when you hear that name, you might not even know who that is. It's like you got to be in the club kind of thing to know who this guy is. If you know anything about manifestation, he's like the original gangster. The OG. The greatest of all time. And at first, when I learnt about this guy, I just thought he was a really smart man. I was like, oh yeah, he's a smart guy. But I didn't really take into heart his teachings or what he was actually trying to say. I just read his book once, heard other people kind of talk about similar topics, and I just kept moving on from that. I kept watching YouTube video after YouTube video, and I kept just kind of being in my own world. But when I really discovered that consciousness is manifestation, manifestation is consciousness, and he's the guy who actually said that, I'm pretty sure, it really changed the game for me personally. Because throughout my own personal journey, I was kind of crawling through glass to change the way I think, to change my mindsets, to change my habits, perhaps even to change my identity. Just the whole concept of change in general was somehow supposed to be painful. That's even the narrative behind what change is supposed to look like. Change is painful, they say. And even I have said this before. That basically in order to move the needle, one pain must become greater than another. That's how change works. That's what they always say anyway. And perhaps that is true. But it might not really be the only truth when I think about it like this. It might not be the only narrative, the only story behind how change actually works, because even my brother said, which is on the same scale, desire. If one desire is greater than another, then obviously you're going to move in the direction where there's a stronger desire for something. But the reason I fall back on the pain ratio is because if there's a murderer chasing after you with a knife, you're more likely to run for your life than you are towards $1 million duffel bag. And fear tends to be an effective motivator for the majority of the world. This is why governments use this type of thing. This is why religions use this type of thing. Fear-based narratives. And unfortunately, fear gets us very hooked. And this is why we're probably seeking out dating and relationship advice at all. Because we're afraid. We're fearful. And this is the problem. We're coming from this fearful place. And it's this fearful place that gets us trapped in an echo chamber of our own mind, where we're pretty much unable to resolve our own suffering. And somehow what we actually need to do, and I'm telling you the answer now, we need to remove ourselves out of the frame, out of that bubble. And that might not resonate with you to think that you're in a bubble, but we've all been in our own bubbles. We've all been in our own frames, our own narratives. And the thing is, we identify with these narratives. And if these narratives are challenged, we feel personally attacked. Or we take these narratives too seriously. And when these narratives start to crumble, which a lot of the times can happen, you'll see, maybe within yourself, but you'll see other people cling onto these for dear life. It's very interesting to observe. But back to Neville Goddard, if I have to give the advice I gave that guy 4 years ago, how could we get that guy, the so-called third party, to get out of the picture and have the lass be attracted to him? Well, like I said in my first video, there's only so much we can do. Basically, don't respond in a negative manner. Change the way you see things. Look at the negative circumstance as a good thing. Yada, yada, yada. Go check out that video. But now knowing, even if I was to watch YouTube videos like Subconscious Laws, she would probably tell you something like, just imagine that the guy's gone and just imagine that you're already together. Or if you're a lass, just imagine, like that the other guy is out of the picture or something, and other girl, and then your significant person is with you. Just literally imagine this. And it's an interesting idea because it kind of just skips everything. And I watched a video last night talking about this in a very interesting way, that manifestation is kind of the process of doing something versus being something. I can't remember the guy's channel. I'm still curious about it to see if he's actually legit, but it seemed relevant. And he basically said that when you manifest stuff, you are in the process of doing. And if you're in the process of doing, it means you are not that thing yet that you desire. You're meditating and double checking your thoughts, monitoring yourself, being analytical, which I've actually done quite a bit. And it's kind of annoying too. And it's like, you know what, Neville Goddard just decided he was in Barbados, even though he was instructed originally to feel like that and be like that and think like that, to see the world from Barbados. You just are that. You just decide that you are. When you want to leave the army, you just decided that you're sleeping in your own bedroom in New York City or something like that, as opposed to doing anything tactical to reach that point. It's just a very interesting way to look at the world. So if I had to give you advice on how to tip the scales in your favor even more, then I would probably say change your self-concept, obviously. Change the way you see the romantic interest. Change the narrative. But what I didn't say at the time, which I'm saying now, is to change the way you see yourself, which is your own self-concept. So we're in this frame, we're looking through this lens, and this lens is like this echo chamber, reinforcing itself. And we need to remove ourselves out of this lens, out of this frame, out of this narrative. Because this narrative, this frame that we're stuck in, is the very thing that created the problem in the first place. And this is a very different way of looking at things. If you would understand that you are a faceless, formless awareness, and that you're not just the observer looking out at the world, you are actually the creator, which is a very, very fascinating thing to think about. But hear me out. If you treat a thing like this, then through that lens, it is this way. So you see yourself as the creator, and you have to ask yourself, how did I create this situation where my romantic interest is hanging out with someone else? I would have to ask myself the same question too. How the hell did I create it? And sometimes we might be a bit oblivious to how the hell we're creating these types of things. And so we just keep on meditating until we get a very clear picture. Because the more crystal clear you are on everything, the easier this shit's going to be. However, I would say, let's say you're going to start manifesting, which I just say, just already decide that you're there and then don't worry about it. What would the version of you say that would already have it? He'd probably just say, don't worry about it. Or she'd just say, well, don't worry about it. If it works out, awesome. If it doesn't, that's fine, because you're either still going to get the thing that you want anyway, or you'll get the equivalent. And that's a quote from the book How to Win the Game of Life by Florence Scovel Shinn. I felt like I was going to say something there, but basically, yeah, just, I suppose, I often say don't listen to dating advice most of the time, because most of the time it's not relevant to you. It's not relevant to your situation. But Neville Goddard's material, on the other hand, is 100% applicable. 100%, because we're always doing it. I personally am focusing mainly just on the relationships aspect of life. But your wealth and your health do contribute or are entangled in your relationships, believe it or not. So if you can reinforce your own health, awesome. If you can reinforce your own financial well-being, awesome. That does help contribute to your relationship well-being. Is there anything else I'd have to say? If the guy was asking me another question, like if he was here with me, the same guy from 4 years ago, if he asked me again, how do I imagine that we're together, etc. What do I do? Well, like I said, we got to figure out, how did we create this situation to begin with? I'm guessing that there's probably something from childhood. Basically, a typical way we've been reacting, we've been thinking for a long time. And it's made manifest, because that's what manifestation is. Manifestation is consciousness. Your reality is your consciousness made manifest. Now, this sounds kind of woo-woo, especially for relationships, especially if you're just coming from attraction-based things or systems theory-based things. But this is the process. If you don't believe me, read the book called The Untethered Soul. That's a great, fantastic start. And we change our goal. Our goal, our number one goal, is to not reap the harvest here necessarily, because we're already facing the harvest. Our goal is to change the source, the spring, and that is obviously from within, our state of consciousness. Our goal is to change our state of consciousness. And the state is our structural integrity. The state is our emotional integrity, our emotional state. If you want to gauge roughly what your state of consciousness is, you can check your feelings, your emotions. That's like a gauge. It shows you where you're at roughly. You can also monitor your thoughts, and you just observe them, because you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. I don't necessarily know how much we create the thoughts, but because we're based in the frame that we're in, we do create them the way they are typically. And are they prominently fear-based, or are they faith-based? And to a certain degree, we do have to be a little bit self-delulu. Just a little bit. To a sufficient degree, where we are basically unhinged from any type of perceived threat. We can't let hazards define us. We define those hazards. In case I've dabbled on for too long, let me see if I can restate what I just said. If you have a romantic interest, whether it's in the workplace or somewhere else IRL, and they're seeing someone else, you have to be completely unbothered by it. Understand that you created the situation because you're sitting in a state of consciousness that made manifest this. And you have to change your state of consciousness by entering into a completely different frame. Because the frame that you're currently in is producing different thoughts, feelings, and questions that literally just echo chamber and ricochet into more of the same. So we need to change the frame so that we can put ourselves in a completely different echo chamber that ricochets different thoughts and feelings and questions that will literally create a new reality. And I wanted to reflect on a real example of this. I've actually got a few. But I know this works because I've done this before without my own coaches. My own coaches they treated me like a petulant child. But without their help and through just 2 books, I was able to move away from hell states to heavenly states. There's a book called Do the Work by Dr. Nicole, something like that. Now, I used to actually have a lot of mother issues. It was actually pretty bad. So, growing up, the relationship between me and my mother wasn't the healthiest because there was always a lot of yelling. And usually that was coming from the mother's side. Right now, I don't worry about that so much, and I don't really care about that so much anymore because I forgive. I forgive my mother, or I forgave. It's a long time ago now. Because I realized after reading that book, there was something wrong with me. My reactions, my response, the way I was looking at how my mother treated me, etc. It wasn't doing me any favors. And by holding on to these negative images, it was actually kind of harming an ongoing relationship. Like if I wanted to have a proper relationship, with my mother. This isn't romantic interest stuff, but it works the same, right? It does affect your relationships with your romantic interest because in my first marriage, I projected my expectations of what a wife was supposed to be onto my first wife. If she wasn't yelling at me, if she wasn't treating me horribly, I would try to evoke that in her so that she would do that because it wasn't comfortable not to receive that, if that makes sense. And at the same time, I felt like I was fighting against it the whole time, even though it wasn't really there. In my first marriage, yeah, there was some, verbal scuffles, and I was a little bit narcissistic here and there. But we definitely had a very great relationship until Koof jab happened. And during that time, instead of remaining emotionally stable, I was extremely emotionally unstable. Granted, I feel that anyone in their right mind would feel the way I did. But I do reflect and know that I could have responded differently to the tribulations that were happening around me. Now, the thing is that little did I know at the time, I was bringing these tribulations into fruition by constantly feeling that fear, by constantly feeling the past as if it was present, and I was making those projections. So read that book, Do the Work by Dr. Nicole. I think that's the name of the author. And the moral of that little story, right, with the book, is that I changed the way I see my mother. I changed the way I interacted. I changed how I was feeling on the inside, and I barely did anything to get this ball rolling other than just somehow feel a shift inside of me just on the reading of the book. Didn't even practice anything in the book. I just read it once. And the same for another book called The Science of Being Great. And I used the same kind of idea to forgive my dad after a bit of a violent scuffle that we had a couple of years ago. But that's not really going to happen anymore because since reading that book, that's over and done. And since learning about Neville Goddard and going through my own coaching and going through my own journey, the relationship has become a lot more stable. It's much less fearful. And same with my siblings. I have had, when I was growing up, there were scuffles between me and my siblings. It was a bit annoying. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it wasn't pretty. And I feel like I humbled myself, and especially my second brother, my first brother, because I'm the oldest. So the second child, I said sorry for him for me initiating a lot of the, or participating in a lot of the scuffles that we had. Because I don't think growing up you're going to want to hold on to that. And to say sorry and forgive is kind of the only way to move past that. And that's what we did, and we continue to stay in touch. And so it's the same thing for your romantic interest. It's the same thing. There's something that we need to do on the inside. Even if it's not a lot, there's something that we need to do to change everything completely. Even if we don't realize what that is yet. But I've just told you the answer. It's your state of consciousness, the source, the number one first principle before all first principles. John 1:3. So, again, if I was giving that guy advice, I'd tell him the same stuff I said last time about half a year ago. But I'd also say, imagine yourself already being in a relationship. Because here's the thing. For something to exist, it must first exist in the mind. And when I got my first marriage, looking back, I realized that some of the obstacles didn't really exist between me and my romantic interest. And over the years, I've been chased, and some lasses have literally been kind of begging to, say, breed with me and kiss me. And why do I mention that? Because I know I'm a very desirable being. But if there was any downfall at any point in my previous relationships, it was usually my own doing. And that is what brought them to a still, halt, or a downfall in the past. It was always my own doing. Because if we look through the lens of we are the creator, then through that lens, we are the creator. So how did we create the situation where there's a third party at all? How did we create a situation where the other person is merely reiterating back to us our own state of being? That is all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed that. If you learned something new, give me a follow, like the video, comment, share your wisdom. Maybe you think I'm full of shite. Let me know if you think that's the case. And if you want to work with me one-on-one, that option is available to you. And I highly recommend you do that, because instead of having to scour the internet for dating advice that's usually not applicable to you, you can get your very own personal relationship coach, me, who been there, done that, and I can give you my own personal takes. The more packages you get, I give you a discount. Stay safe and alive out there.